Caregiving isn't a single role, it's an always-on operating system. It's not just the tasks people can see, it's the invisible vigilance underneath, the tracking, anticipating, planning, advocating, translating, and emotionally steadying everyone else, while your own needs slip quietly to the bottom of the list. And here's the part most people miss. When caregivers cope, it often doesn't mean they're okay. It means they're learning to function in survival mode because there wasn't another option. This episode is for the person who's been told to just rest or just ask for help while living a life where the mental tabs never close. We're talking about what support actually looks like, why micro moments matter, and how you come back to yourself without needing a dramatic breakdown to prove you're struggling. Welcome to Radiant Moments Caregiver Oasis. This is the podcast for overwhelmed family caregivers who are holding it together inside medical, disability, school, and service systems and need simple, nervous system safe tools and a steady voice to advocate without self-abandoning. Today's episode is a special collaboration, a shared conversation with Greer Jones, host of Neurodivergent Conversations and the founder of The Unfinished Idea, where she supports mums raising neurodivergent kids to not just survive motherhood, but thrive with practical tools and a community that truly gets it. In this conversation, we go straight into the truths caregivers rarely get to say out loud, the invisible mental load no one sees, why just relax doesn't land when you're always on alert, what real support looks like, and why vague offers often disappear, how micro moments of regulation can keep you steady in hard rooms, and what it means to find yourself again, one tiny choice at a time. If you've ever felt like you're disappearing in the role, you're in the right place. I'm Michelle, founder of J&B Inspired and the host of Radiant Moments Caregiver Oasis. I've been a caregiver for 14 years in neurodivergent and medically complex family life, and my work is about helping caregivers feel seen, supported, and less alone, with practical tools for emotional regulation, burnout prevention, and regulated advocacy. And if you'd like a gentle next step after today's episode, my free gratitude journal is linked in the show notes. It's designed to help you notice tiny points of light without pretending things are fine.
Hey, and I'm Greer, the host of the podcast Neurodivergent Conversations, as well as the founder of The Unfinished Idea, where I help mamas who are navigating the neurodivergent world to not just survive motherhood, but thrive in motherhood through practical tools, resources, and finding a community that actually gets it. I just have been there, I've done it, and I don't want any other mom to know that they are alone because they're not. So I'm passionately pursuing mamas who are raising neurodivergent kids to know that they're never alone. And I'm so excited that we are doing a joint feed drop. And Michelle, I would love to know what is kind of one, I'm sure there are many, but what is one thing that people kind of misunderstand about caregivers and kind of caregiving?
I think the biggest misunderstanding is that people see the tasks, but they don't see the constant mental and emotional load underneath. I think caregiving isn't just helping out, it's living with an always on awareness of what could go wrong, what needs to be remembered, what needs planning, and what needs advocating for. And if a caregiver looks like they're coping, people often assume they're fine when actually they might just be doing what they've had to do to keep everybody safe. Another big one is that support can become opinions or advice when what caregivers truly need is something that genuinely removes the weight. Practical help, consistency, and someone who can sit with them without trying to fix or minimize it. And I guess they don't see the load. They don't see the cost. People think it's just helping, but it's a full mental job with no off switch.
Yeah, definitely. I think talking about that off switch and how caregiving does not have that, and kind of as well as the invisible load, I think something that the world is starting to say more about neurodivergence is that it's an invisible disability, because you can look at a child or an adult and think there's nothing wrong with them. But thinking about that on and off switch, like, is there a way that caregivers can switch off, or is that something they have to learn? Is that just a new reality that they hold, is that they never can switch off?
I think when you're looking at the off switch. When somebody says, just relax, just sit down and take 5 minutes, that's really hard, especially if you have complex medical needs or you're looking after neurodivergent children, because things can happen and change in such a short time. And generally, when you're a caregiver, we're so hyper aware of the loved ones we care for so that we can react in a proactive manner rather than a reactive manner. And I think when we look at the on-off switch, it has to start with micro moments when we've been doing it for years. So if you're a long-haul caregiver, 10 plus years, this is your life, and you're building on trying to rediscover yourself in those moments because you have been on the go all the time. And I kind of feel like when you get into bed and you lie down and your brain's like, yeah, you forgot to get the milk and you didn't do the laundry and you missed this. And oh, what about that medication? It's in those moments that we really pick up that we're not able to switch off easily. So when we're starting out, it's really important that we show ourselves grace and compassion and that we're not going to get it right all the time. And I guess something that would be like a micro moment would be habit stacking. So making a cup of coffee, making your morning breakfast, doing a breathing exercise. Nobody can tell that you're doing it. 90 seconds worth of investment to start with. And just seeing that instead of your shoulders being up here because you're preparing for the onslaught of the day, are we going to get all of the things that are in our routine, or is something going to pass us sideways like a meltdown or a sensory overload moment, or that we had to make a change to the routine and our child just doesn't cope with it? And so in those moments, we can pull on these tiny tools of self-regulation. And then as you do it, it becomes more ingrained as a routine. And it takes a good 30 to 60 days of consistency for something to become natural, added in, and you don't really think about it. And so it's really important to do it when you're calm, when there isn't chaos, so that you can access it because you've already practiced it. So I feel like it can feel overwhelming when somebody says you just need to relax, turn it off, I lie down and I go to sleep. I think it's important to recognize that our bodies have been programmed over such a long time to be ready, to still be in that fight flight frame. Even after an appointment, pick up from school, anything that changes, we're on. And so to then ask a caregiver to just switch it off, that's not really feasible when you're first starting out. So I think it's building that bridge for yourself to rediscover who you are, what you're doing, and how you kind of feel in your body. Because if you just keep going and you're not recognizing, hey, you need water, you need food, you need to sit down for a moment, and you're ignoring that because you've got to get to the next appointment. These little moments where you stack it on top of something that you do already makes it feel manageable. It's not overwhelming. You're not adding to your load, and it's private. Nobody else has to know. And I think that that's kindness to ourselves.
Yeah. I talk a lot about having micro resets or micro moments and having, like you say, that kind of stacking as well. Kind of, I call them like reminder tasks. So it's kind of the same of every time you make it yourself a cup of tea or coffee, you do this thing while the kettle's boiling or while you're having the tea or coffee or whatever that looks like. And so it's so important to have those moments. And I really liked how you said it's like kind of a bridge to the next thing. So you're not solving everything in that little moment, but it's getting you to the next thing. It's getting you to that next appointment or to the next, conversation. But you can easily have several micro moments because they are so easy and so simple. And like you say, kind of invisible. No one needs to know you're doing it. It's not like, I'm nothing against yoga, but it's not like a big yoga mat. You don't carry that around and like, hold on a second. And so I think, yeah, it's a good reminder that micro moments they can be so powerful. I mean, I remember when I first started kind of thinking through them, I was like, but they're so small. Like, how is that going to actually help me? But actually really pausing for 30 seconds to a minute to, 90 seconds, like can really reset your nervous system and really kind of balance you. And that co-regulation is so important. It's so vital for the house.
It is. And also when you are taking that moment for yourself, especially like if you're in the hospital, you're in an emergency department and you're trying to manage your loved one's emotions, and then all of the different medical professionals, nurses, stras, and the consultant that's coming, they all have different personalities, and it can be super overwhelming to have to repeat your story for your loved one over and over again. And generally, when we're caregivers, we have our filing cabinets open in our brain. What medications are they on? Where have they been? Who's seen them? Who is in their medical team? And so sometimes when you've got that crossover, it can feel overwhelming, especially with all the noises, and we can feel overstimulated as well. And it's great to just be able to turn around for a second, bend over to pick something out of your handbag and reset in that moment before you turn around and you're back as your fierce advocate. And I think nobody talks about that when you first become a caregiver, 10 years in, 20 years in. We get that's not shared. It's not shared that it's okay for a caregiver to take time to self-regulate, to be able to be a part of the care plan. It feels like you're running uphill. There's an uphill battle that you're having to fight constantly. They're just breaths. Nobody knows. You still like you've got it all under control. You're not falling apart. You're not being difficult. You don't feel agitated. Your loved one sees that you're in control and you're calm, so they feel calm. And it has this knock-on effect. And you're right. When I first started, after I hit my burnout, and I acknowledged that something had to change, my body couldn't keep going the way it was. And I didn't realize how powerful just giving myself a moment to take a deep breath, not breathe up here, and how much calmer I felt, how much access I had to my memory then when I took that moment. And it's that first step of the unknown. If you've never done it before and nobody's ever shown you, or you haven't got support to talk it through if it felt weird or how you could adjust it, and you're doing it all alone, because most of the time, they're like, just ask for help. But when you're in that phase, asking for help is a lot. What am I asking for help for? When it's full on, it's hard to even come up with ideas for how we can help, what we want help with. I think that's part of the equation for caregivers, is not feeling shame or guilt around asking for help or reaching out to another caregiver to say, I need a different strategy. I'm feeling overwhelmed. I feel like I'm falling apart. How are you doing this every day? And to be able to be received in no judgment. I get you. I'm there. I've been there. There's safe space. You can share what's going on and not feel like you're the worst parent in the whole world for going, today is a really hard day. I'll know what to do. I know how to manage. Somebody tell me what to do. And I think what you're doing and the advocacy you have, and then what I'm creating as well in J&B Inspired, provides a different approach, because we are caregivers in our own right. We provide support in that space. So we've got lived experience where we know what it feels like to be alone, to be judged. And I think that's the difference between somebody who's never cared for somebody and is in this space and they're doing a great job, but they don't have the same lived experience that being in caregiving provides you. So I think that's important.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I think lived experience brings just a whole new element and allows, like you say, when I say, so I have a community called the Unfinished Community. And when I go in there and say to these mamas, my son just did this, and I'll say some like ridiculous thing, I know that there'll be no judgment. They will often laugh with me about it. They will say, oh, me too. Like, that kind of just being in a space that. So my son does not like wearing clothes. So he'll often just start stripping randomly. Not so much now at school, but when he first started school, he would just like, I'm done for the day. Let me just start taking my clothes off. And it's the middle of the school day. So that was always a fun call. But this community got it. They were like, we've been there. We've dealt with, we kind of joke, like when you're in the neurodivergent world, you have at least a book of kind of naked stories, like awkward naked stories. And so I think having that community of people just get it is so important, because as a caregiver, as someone who's navigating the neurodivergent world and medical care needs, it's also like you are living in a whole different world, but still living in this world. And it's a hard, I don't know if to reconcile that, but just that kind of reality, like you're living in, I feel like a little bit of two worlds. So I know that. And I think thinking about the support elements, so a long time ago, I did a kind of a pastoral care course for a previous job. And one of the things probably the one thing that stuck with me, I shouldn't say that. It was a very good course, and this was about kind of more of a bereavement situation, but I think it works when someone is overloaded, whether that be grief, whether that be their child, whatever, when someone is overwhelmed and overloaded, like being really specific about the support you can offer. So I hate it when someone's like, oh, just call me if you need me. I'm like, what does that mean? I also live in England. So I'm from the US, but I live in England. And British people, I love them. I have lived here for 15 years. I am now a British citizen. However, they will say things, but they don't actually mean them. So it's very classic. Oh, just call me if you need me. And if I actually called them, they'd be like shocked. They'd be like, why, what? You called me? And I'm like, you said it. You told me. But there's that element, but also the like, I don't know how much support they can offer, and I don't want to be a burden to them or whatever. And so whenever I've offered support, I always say, hey, I can come do your laundry for you or cook you a meal. Let me know which one you prefer. Like, so I'm telling them what I can offer, what I can do. And I think that has, and I've told people that as well. I'm like, if you're going to offer support, can you be really specific about what you can offer? I don't want to burden you. And it's been so helpful when they tell me, oh, I can do, I mean, I've had someone come and be like, I'll hoover all your floors. I really enjoy hoovering. And I'm like, perfect. Come hoover my floors. Most random thing, but actually that's great because that means that's done. Or yeah, we went through a really difficult period a couple years ago and I had someone come walk our dog because they're like, oh, I enjoy walking. You have dogs. Let me be specific and offer that, that kind of thing. And so yeah, just I guess really to say, encourage people to be specific about what they can support, but also say to people, and that this is hard. I've had to learn this a lot and I still like very much do as I say, not as I do, but ask people for specific support as well. Like, I really could use a meal for the freezer, like being really specific about that instead of just saying, I don't know what to cook. Again, that other person doesn't know what that means. So I don't know, my 2 cents about support. And again, do as I say, not as I do, because I'm still, it's hard to ask for support when you're in it. And again, for me, I really don't want to burden people. So I don't.
And it's hard also because when you put that hand out for help, it's hard if they say no or it gets rejected as well, because there's that insecurity that you're too much. You're asking too much. You should, I think in my time, I've been told, but you decided to have them. So you should be able to manage what's come your way. I was like, thank you so much. That was extremely helpful and supportive. But I don't think anybody goes into making or creating a family with the expectation that something is not going to be right. They're not going to be healthy. There's this unknown territory that nobody gives you a handbook for. Nobody comes to you and says, oh, I've lived this. Let me help you. There isn't that experience. And I think you're right. When people don't know how to manage medical complex needs, they don't know how to talk to you about it, how to talk about neurodivergence. Sometimes they have really rigid thought patterns about behavior without accepting neurodivergent statuses. And I think when we really look at that statement, if you need help, give me a call, that's their way of safely backing out without having to put skin on the table. And that's not, saying that negatively to that person. It's not saying that they wouldn't help if we asked. It's just saying they have no idea how to manage this situation. It can scare them. It can make them feel uncomfortable to even talk about it. And when you live it day in and day out, there isn't a lot else you've got in your repertoire to talk about, because it's not like you're leaving to go and work full time. You might be going and doing a couple of hours here and there, and then you get a phone call from school to say, sorry, you need to come back, and you have to leave your job. Or your employer's like, look, I fully understand, but I just can't continue to support you in this space. And I've had lots of people exit stage left, and they do it by saying, if you need anything, please give me a call. I'm here to help. And then you just don't hear from them. And that's hard. And you're like, is it my fault? Did I do something? Did I say something wrong? And it has nothing to do with us as caregivers or us as a person. It just that they don't know what to do in that space. And I feel like for real support for caregivers, it actually has to fit like their real life, not something that like adds anything that you have to keep up with. So like you were saying, practical things, preparing a meal, admin support if you need somebody to go and drop some letters off at the post office, picking the kids up from school if that's a safe person to do so, sitting in an appointment if you just need a second pair of ears, because you'd be very surprised as a caregiver, even when you're not. If there is a crisis happening, a second pair of ears might have picked up completely different information to what you did. Or they picked up some I picked up others, and then we come together and we're like, all right, what did you hear? What did I hear? Being that person that you can ring after an appointment to be the calm down space so that you can regulate before you have to jump back out of the car and be mum or be caregiver or be medical mode. And I think what people don't understand is those small acts like hoovering the carpet, picking up, say you place an order for groceries, picking up that order for groceries and putting it away, those really help reduce the load, our mental load, our physical load, our time load. And it also looks like nervous system support, as I was saying. So being the caregiver's calm space, having somebody who is happy to just sit and hear that you've had a rubbish day. They don't have to problem solve it. They don't have to be there to do anything but say, yeah, that's a hard day. Sometimes that's all we need is somebody to acknowledge that we've had a hard day. Being in a space where caregivers who truly get it, like we were talking about before, is another layer to that support. No judgment, honest feedback, having people who have actually lived it and been, like you were saying, yes, my child has also completely stripped and had a sensory meltdown because the pants were terrible. Can't wear the school uniform. You know, we've been there too. We know. And at the time, it's mortifying. When it first happens, mortifying. And then you're like, well, we need to find a different uniform. We need to find a different thing that helps them. Let's look at helping them to be more successful in that space. And I think, particularly in the school environment, their knee-jerk reaction is, please come and pick them up. It's not, oh, we notice that he can't sit still in his chair once we're about to start undressing. What could we do to redirect to help him to feel calm in that space? And I think that's where having these communities, having these spaces can help us in those like really hard rooms. And when you're going from one appointment to the other, and even if it's a friend who comes to pick up a coffee with you, you drive past after the appointment and you just get to talk, even if your kids are there and it's just 5 minutes. It helps us to breathe. It helps us to regulate. And it helps us to like walk steadier when we get home, where we have to pick up and keep going. There isn't like a, hey, I can fall apart now and sob because my system is overloaded. I forgot to ask those questions. And then later we're crying in the shower because we don't want anybody to know that we're not coping. We didn't do well then. I think those small moments, the real life bits, are what makes the difference in caregiver support long term.
Yeah. I think about, my best friend, the reason we see each other, we don't see each other all the time, but we see each other a lot, is because she goes grocery shopping with me or she'll go run errands with me. And that's when we get to chat. And half the time I do grocery shopping, she's like, oh, I need to pick up a few bits. And she has like half a trolley as well. But it's that doing life together has just meant even those mundane tasks have been a little bit more enjoyable. Those kind of things, sitting in therapy kind of waiting rooms, like she comes and just, not every time, but I'm just like, oh, here's what I have, but I'm doing these things too. So you can come along if you want. It just makes it so that therapy room isn't just me sitting there waiting, because that's what we have to do. And so, yeah, I think having like support can even be that. It doesn't have to be carving out an hour to sit down and have a coffee with a friend. As much as that is nice, and don't get me wrong, that is also very helpful. But it can just be, hey, let's go grocery shopping together and we'll grab a coffee before and walk around. Sometimes we walk around very slow. Other times we don't, but it's just that kind of thing. And so I think support looks different. I mean, I look back now in the season I'm in now, support looks very different than what it did 6 months ago and what it did even a year ago. So I think it can ebb and flow as well. What would you say to the caregiver or the mama, to the parent who feels like they're kind of losing themselves?
I think it's important to recognize that a lot of caregivers feel this at one point or another in their caregiving journey, because caregiving is like your whole identity when you take it on. When you step into that role, you're advocating for somebody's life. This is not a part-time job. This is not a casual fly in, fly out situation. And because we're living the role like every single day, how we sleep, how we eat, the way we plan and the way we like move through the world really starts revolving around other people's needs. We focus on becoming an advocate, as I was talking about before, being like hyper aware and staying one step ahead. And without even realizing it, our wants and needs slip to the bottom of the list. I didn't have time for that. I'll wash my hair tomorrow. There's not enough time for me to have that facial or do something that I used to do, go for a bushwalk on my own. Those things become at the very bottom of the list. And then there's those moments that hit a lot of caregivers, and someone sits down and asks you, who's not in the caregiving world, who's never experienced it, and they say, what do you like doing? What's your biggest dream? What are you doing in your life? And there's that moment when you're in the thick of it and that's all you do, day in, day out. And then there's that feeling of that blank space. What is my biggest dream? What was my biggest dream? What do I like doing? And the first things that come to mind is like, I like preparing. No, that's not really me. That's just what I've become. Because you've been in this survival mode and this service-based mode for so long, that's when the real questions start. Who am I outside of this role? What do I want? And how do I rebuild my identity while still being a caregiver? And I think it starts with adding one small hat at a time back onto your own life, not to escape caregiving, but to expand beyond what it is. So it's like one tiny practice that just for you. So walking, journaling, listening to a podcast, singing out loud in the kitchen while you're cooking. It could be setting one boundary that protects your energy. I'd love to come to that barbecue. I just can't do it this time, but I'd love to go to a coffee with you on this date. Setting one dream that you let yourself say out loud, even if it's small. I'd love to go for a massage. How do I make going for an hour massage a thing? I think caregivers or caregiving can become so loud that our own voice sounds unfamiliar to ourselves. We stop listening to the cues of our body. We stop pushing towards what draws us in. I love doing puzzles, and not just little puzzles, but thousands and thousands of pieces. Particularly in my early caregiving, it had become like a full-on focus where I couldn't go to bed because I needed to put more puzzle pieces in because it was my only moment that I was getting. And it came to a point where I had to stop doing them because I was so in need of that moment of peace and I couldn't find it, couldn't have it. And that was where you don't stop being a caregiver. So now I've had to find myself again, and you simply start making room for yourself inside the life that you're already living. And an example of that is how I've created JB Inspired. It was something that my boys were like, Mum, you help so many people whilst we're in the hospital to be okay. You need to do what you do for us, for others. And it was that moment of permission to add something. And there was lots of challenges that came with me taking a tiny bit of space back doing this podcast. I set it so that it's when they're asleep, really early in the morning or later at night, but it's an hour where I get to dedicate to helping just one other person. If I can help one other caregiver to find a moment of peace in the chaos, to have tools that actually work, that don't take up significant time because we don't have it, to be able to share a story that somebody else goes, oh my God, I've lived that. I know that feeling. Do what medical professionals couldn't do, which was, did you know there's this machine that could make your life 1,000 times easier? And it was another mum I walked past and I went, where did you get that? Because at the time I was drip feeding my boys through their pegs in their stomach. And she was like, oh, don't you have one? Oh, your dietitian should have given you one. You don't know what you don't know. I think that's where it starts, is having somebody else feedback that it's okay to take a moment for yourself, that you may feel guilty. You may feel like you're abandoning the job that you're doing. But the question I like to pose is, what happens if you can't do it anymore? What happens if you have to be hospitalized? What happens if you have to have a hard stop? Who could step in and do the job that you're doing in the way that you're doing it to ensure your loved one receives the best care possible. Right now, nobody. So it's about setting up those systems to rediscover yourself so that you're feeding back into your own cup, because we give so much away, so that we don't end up at burnout. We don't end up in a situation where there isn't anybody and people burn out so much faster. Like when I went through burnout and I had to have a range of really intense medical procedures done, and I'd only just finished in December with my last operation, and my body just went, here is a brick wall, stop.
Yeah.
And I was like, and I had 6 people trying to do what I did day to day, rotating, because after a couple of days, they were like, how do you do this? How is this possible? And that's the reality of caregiving, is that we do so many tiny micro things every single day that it's hard to communicate that with somebody else, or for someone else to step into our shoes. So if we stop and somebody asks us, what's your biggest dream? Or what do you like doing? And we can't answer that, that's our first white flag that says we need to take a moment. We need to show ourselves compassion, grace, and honesty that we need love too. We need interests, we need hobbies. And so it's finding those pathways that allow you to take 20 minutes out to listen to a podcast once a week, once a fortnight, whatever is manageable, and then build up from there. Because the other thing is that there could be pushback from your loved one because you've been attentive and, there for them so much that they'll be like, excuse me, I feel like I'm being ignored or I'm not getting the level of care. And so it's also about educating our loved ones that for me to love you the way I am, I need to invest in me too, because otherwise I'm going to fall over and there's nobody here to step in if I fall. And I think that was the hardest part for the loved ones that I care for, is that I had to pull back slightly so that I could give them more. And I was able to give them better care, better nervous system regulation for myself. I didn't find myself feeling irritated or overwhelmed to that same level.
I have a course as well as I work a lot with mums. So I talk a lot about how mums are kind of a thermostat in the home. And it's kind of just that constant air, constant setting the temperature, kind of trying to be calm, regulate. But the thermostat is always on. If the thermostat is always running, it's always on, which means the mom is always there and always on, and how it's okay to turn that off sometimes. Or kind of the idea, like you just said, of the amount of times I've heard moms be like, oh, I feel really guilty when I take time for me, or I feel selfish. Taking time for you means you're then able to care better, like you said, for your child, for your house. A study shows that parents or kind of moms who care for children with additional needs, whether that be medical or neurodivergent, their stress levels are constantly raised 4 times higher than a typical mom or a neurotypical mom, which is already raised compared to someone who doesn't have kids, which I don't quite know what that difference is, but I just know those who have additional needs are way up here, we'll just say. Physically, your body, because you're at a higher stress, you are literally taking 20 years potentially off your life, which is insane to think about. That is the level of stress you're at, is that you're kind of taking 20 years away. And so being able to, again, not necessarily turn it off, but just even lower it sometimes means you're getting life back, which sounds very extreme and very intense, but that's the kind of level that we're at. One question I like to always end with, or kind of come to a close, is what do you want the world to know? I always say kind of about neurodivergent people, but I'd love to know, kind of flip it a little bit and say, what would you like the world to know about caregivers? Just your kind of last thing of advice. I don't know if advice is the right word, but just what would you want the world to know?
I think I'd like them to know that caregivers are not doing one big heroic act. They're doing thousands of quiet moments of noticing, choosing, and holding it all together. It's the appointments, the medications, the school, the therapy supports, paperwork, transport routines. They're the unseen pieces that keep our life steady for the people that we love and that we care for. And it's also the emotional side, having to stay calm when things feel really uncertain, anticipating what might be hard, and trying to make home feel safe and regulated. And then there's the advocacy within side systems, being a translator, the steady voice, the one who remembers the details when everyone else is overwhelmed. And for me, caregiving is a blend of practical care, emotional steadiness, and advocacy. And I think the deepest work is learning to do all of that without losing themselves in the process. And if you know a caregiver, I think one of the biggest things that we need to hear is you're not failing. You're carrying too much for too long. And of course, you feel like you're disappearing. And you're allowed to be part of the care plan, not just the person keeping everyone else afloat. You don't have to find yourself in one big, brave moment. You can come back in tiny ones. Start with one breath where you let your shoulders drop. One boundary that says, I matter too. And one small ask that helps us week to week. Every 90-second counts. And please hear this. You're not alone. You're not gone. And you're still in there. You just have been in survival mode for so long that you've had to put yourself down to keep going. But you can begin to pick yourself back up, piece by piece. And there is still softness, joy, and future version of you. And she or he starts with the smallest, kindest choice today. And I think if you've reached burnout, because some caregivers are on that cusp, it isn't a personal weakness. It's what's happened when the load stays so high and the support stays way too low. And we see you, we hear you, and you're not alone in this journey. Reach out. There's lots of us who have lived it, who are living it day to day, who can be those ears, that heart, and that shoulder to help you through the next moment.
Yeah, I would just echo basically everything you said, that idea that they're not alone. There are people out there. And I think the one thing I've really learned the last few years is community looks very different than what I thought it would look like, but it doesn't mean it's any less, if that makes sense. The community I have found is mostly online. And one of my closest friends is another mom who I have never met in person, but we text, we've FaceTimed a few times, we are there. I've never actually, which is weird to think. I'm like, this is so weird that I've never met you in person. And we're actually planning to go on holiday in September together. Again, it will be the first time we met in person. And I'm like, I really hope I like you because I'm planning to spend a week with you. But yeah, just that idea, I guess, that community, it's okay if community looks different than what you thought, as long as you know you're not alone is, I think, so important. And the idea that what we're doing is a lot of micro moments, hundreds of thousands of little decisions, little actions, little things that add up. Those add up over time. And so making sure that we have spaces where we can pause for a minute, we can let go of some of those things, we can just break some of that, because if we keep going, we'll hit a wall, and that's not good. So thank you for that reminder.
No, thank you. And you're right, because community does look different. Because if the community that you had before you became a caregiver slowly fades, it can feel isolating. And it is also really scary to go online, because there are places where that might not look right, but that doesn't mean there isn't still support available for you. And taking that first step is big to finding a community of like-minded, like experience that you are living, so that you don't feel ashamed, scared, guilty to be raw. And I think that's part of caregiving that we missed, is that when you're going to a medical appointment, you cannot be raw. You can't be over emotional, can't be over assertive. You've got to find this intense balance between it all. Finding a community who's lived that and knows that we can't be raw and honest without feeling judged, or without being judged, or having a question mark. Is this person emotionally stable? Can they do this job? And all of those things, instead of it being acknowledged for what it is, a moment where it's just all too much. And we just and it's beautiful to think that we are on two different sides of the world, and we've lived the neurodivergent space, the medically complex space, and we're able to come together and create magic over the internet, and to have this safe space where we can have these conversations, and for other caregivers to find it and feel supported and seen, and then discover more of what's available to them. I think that's also something that we didn't have when I first started my caregiving journey. The internet wasn't big, phones didn't have the same technology that we have now. And I think it's beautiful to also have understanding when we are recording and we're doing things, to have the flexibility to go, this is my world, one moment, please. I'll be back in a second. And to be able to, I was interviewing somebody and they were like, I couldn't come back. Like after what just happened, I wouldn't be able to just sit back down, take a deep breath and keep going.
Yeah.
And I think that that's one of our many magical superpowers that we develop over time. Just come back to where we were, and to be able, we may be shaking or we may be like anxious because of what's happened, but game face is on. We have that. If someone was to give me a hug in a medical moment, that would be a really bad thing, because that breaks my medical mum facade. You know, hug me later. Don't hug me when I have to be fierce medical mum on the warpath. And that's a part of it in those hard rooms, is that we do have to have this shield, I guess I'd put it, that protects us from having the emotions. Because if someone, anybody, would not be human if someone said, look, your son's really struggling and we're going to have to put them on an independent learning plan. No parent ever can just be like, yeah, fine, no worries. It can't. In the car, we might fall apart, but we've had years of practice of, okay, what do we do now? Where are we going to from here? And even though we're not superheroes, I think we develop these extra special abilities that we wouldn't have if we didn't have this experience. And so there are blessings in the hard times too. I always like to say that even in the darkest rainforest, light still is able to filter through to the ground. So there are always silver linings and light to be found, even in our hardest moments. And that's one of my favorite things to bring up when we're having hard times. And it could just simply be that lady bought me a coffee, or that lady bought me or said I had really nice earrings. And that could be the silver lining for the day. But that's still a great silver lining. You didn't ask for the compliment. You didn't ask for something. Someone just gave it to you because they saw you were having a hard time. And I really appreciate the space you're creating. And it's hard as a neurodivergent mum to manage, especially if you've got children on polar opposites, where one is like super emotional, the other is super angry when they're having their meltdowns. I appreciate the difference of managing in those spaces and being able to flip simultaneously to try and manage.
Yeah. I sometimes feel like in moments like that, there's days where I'm just a bit like, at the end of the day, I'm like, oh my gosh, what just happened? I feel like I've gone from one extreme to the other, and I've had to be these two different extremes, and it's just been insane. And so I think it can be a lot, but like you said, there are silver linings. I think something that I share a lot about is I love the movie Inside Out for this reason, basically. I have a picture on my office wall because to me, it shows they're not just walking hand in hand, but joy is actually dragging sadness along and kind of being like, come on, we have to do this together. And that idea is my life. I am sometimes dragging sadness along, and sometimes sadness is dragging joy along, but they're always together, I guess is what that idea. And so even when I'm sitting in sadness, there's still joy. It sounds a little morbid to be like, when I'm sitting in joy, there's still sadness. But that is true, though. There are moments where I have had some profound joy seeing my son do something, but also a little bit of sadness because it's taken him 3 years longer, or I know that that's kind of maybe the extent to which he can do. And beyond that, yeah, I feel sometimes very, very extremes, but I also know that they go hand in hand. So yes, but thank you so much for this conversation and for just all the little reminders, all those like little micro reminders of asking for help and you're not alone and finding community and so much more. But thank you so much for joining my podcast and for allowing me to come onto your podcast.
Yes, thank you very much. I feel like we've been able to have an amazing conversation that brings up really great moments of gold for anybody listening. And the opportunity to be able to work on both podcasts just expands the reach so that more caregivers can feel heard, seen, and know that there are spaces where they can not feel alone anymore.
Yeah.
And I'm really looking forward to diving a little bit deeper into that realm when you talk about mamas of neurodivergence. I feel seen and heard. And I think even as somebody who runs a community like you for caregivers who have medically complex kids or neurodivergent children, it's nice to be able to also find spaces outside of that for me too. So thank you so much. I really appreciated it, and I look forward to sharing our message further. If you've made it to the end of this episode, I want to say this gently and clearly. You're not failing. You're carrying too much for too long, often with support that's too vague, too inconsistent, or simply not built for real caregiver life. Caregiving isn't one big heroic act. It's thousands of quiet moments of noticing, choosing, remembering, advocating, and holding it together, and the cost is real. So if all you can manage today is one breath that drops your shoulders, that counts. If all you can manage is one small boundary that says, I matter too, that counts. If all you can manage is one message to someone safe that says, today was hard, that counts. Because you don't have to find yourself in one brave moment. You can come back in tiny ones. And if you're here in the Radiant Moments community, thank you for being part of this space. You don't have to hold it all alone. One small, gentle support, if you'd like a simple way to catch even one steadying moment in the middle of everything, is my gratitude journal. It's a short, printable journal designed for caregivers to notice tiny points of light without pretending things are fine. You'll find it linked in the show notes. Please take gentle care of your radiant moments and of yourself. I'm Michelle, and this is Radiant Moments, Caregiver Oasis.